friend Shippy, and I practice functional medicine. So I started out as an engineer after college, and then I got sick. And I had to really search to find answers. So I knew something had really happened to my body, but nobody could really help me figure out how to get it back into balance. And I didn't want to just band-aid it with medications. I knew about mycotoxin illness. It didn't cross my mind that that was happening to me, even though I knew there were leaks in my office and that there was one in my house. I didn't put the puzzle pieces together. And that's when I found functional medicine. So functional medicine is a way of looking at the human body that looks at people as an individual. So the way that your unique biochemistry works is very, very different. And then with that, we look for what are the underlying causes for causing your particular system to go out of balance and then cause symptoms and cause illness. So we use the latest technology in testing, and yet we use the simplest things too, like food really matters. What you put in your body is amazing how much of an impact it can have to help your body to heal and have what it needs to run the biochemistry and physiology. What functional medicine did is it gave me the foundation to extend my MD, the allopathic training, to really get back to the biochemistry and physiology and help to look for where things have gone awry. Are there nutritional deficiencies? Is the immune system flared up from something? Are there underlying infections? Are there toxicity? Are there things that need to be shifted with environment because of genetic predisposition? So it gave me so many tools in my toolbox to help myself get better and then also to help my patients. I think a lot of times what happens is when physicians don't have an answer, then it's not real. So many people have been told that they don't even have a problem, or that there aren't, if they do have a problem, something that's neurological, that there aren't good answers for it within the allopathic model. But I think people are asking for different answers, and people are feeling more empowered about really understanding how to get their bodies healthy and not just depending on their doctors to tell them. Functional medicine doctors are a greater resource for looking for finding the root cause and providing solutions that help the body to rebuild rather than just band-aiding it. The Environmental Working Group did a study about 10 years ago that was looking at chemicals in cord blood, and they looked at 413 different chemicals, pesticides, that kind of thing, and the average baby had over 200, or had 287, and every single one of them had dioxins, which are known carcinogens. So our children today are starting out with a heavy burden already of environmental toxins. So I'm seeing all age ranges being affected. So there's a good study that's published on chronic fatigue, which supposedly there's no answers to, but 93% of the patients in the study had mycotoxins in their body. So that alone is huge. Then we know that asthma is an allergic response to it, to mold, but I think there's a lot more underneath that story as well. Some of these autoimmune conditions, that are on the rise, so thyroiditis, MS, rheumatoid arthritis, there's links with that. I am seeing a lot of inflammatory bowel disease, and there's a link with the mycotoxin, and then often colonization of some of these molds, actually finding the mold that's growing in the wall, growing in the gut. Huge neurological links. So neuropathies, tremors, MS, some of these mycotoxins are extremely neurotoxic. And what's exciting about it is when you identify the exposures there, you get it out of the body, people can get better. Yeah, there's really an interesting collection of symptoms that I see associated with mold. So it may just be symptoms of fatigue and hair loss, symptoms that come along with chronic fatigue. Sometimes it's neurological symptoms, so It can even be associated with things like MS and Parkinson's. But a lot of times it's very kind of unusual neuropathies or pain syndromes. Sometimes it's just very, very significant pain in different parts of their bodies. Sometimes it's digestive symptoms, skin rashes. It can really affect any organ system in the body, and it seems to depend on where the particular individual's weakness is. And that's kind of where we come back to functional medicine, because with functional medicine, we don't just look for a blanket solution. We fine-tune it to the individual and what's going on with them. At the first visit, which tends to be long, an hour and a half to 2.5 hours, depending on how sick the person. And a lot of times they say, okay, you're my last stop. You know, if you can't figure it out, then I'm giving up. And they kind of think of me as being the forensic doctor. The testing that's been really helpful with some environmental exposures, as well as more specifically mold, we can actually look for some of the mycotoxins now. So even though the molds make hundreds of different chemicals, we now can link specific ones. There's a lot more research to do to find more, but there are 3 right now that I can actually have people test for and measure to see if it's present in their bodies. Sometimes it's, you know, the person can look like they're totally well, like there's not anything wrong with them, and yet they feel terrible. And that's the most complicated scenario. With kind of figuring out, well, how do we work this out for the whole family? But I will say that once the environment is clean, usually the rest of the family, either the other kids or the other spouse, will say, oh, you know, yeah, those headaches I was having are gone, or I have more energy, or my brain fog is gone. So a lot of times the other family members, it's kind of like the frog in the pot. They don't realize that they don't feel as optimal either. So it actually ends up helping the whole family generally to get a clean environment. We used to think that mold, if there wasn't an active water source, that it wasn't a problem. But now we know that the mold can actually desiccate, get into the airstream. You can't see it. The chemicals that it releases are very small, and that can come in through the skin and through the lungs, and then we can actually find it in the body. So even if you think, oh, well, there's no more water supply right now, it's not a problem, that's not actually the case. And then unfortunately, a lot of times people don't realize the steps that they need to take if they do have water in their homes or in their office buildings or their schools, that really anything that gets wet has to be removed and replaced. Or it can have hidden mold. So even if it looks like the outside is fine, it's dried out now, if you take out the drywall or the wood, there may be mold behind there. The environment's getting more and more toxic, so I think then the mold is actually creating more of a problem. So, you know, a little bit of metal here, a little bit of pesticides, a little bit of plastics, a little bit of carpet outgassing chemicals. So all of these things are accumulating in the human body and then making some of these really potent mycotoxins that are used for biological warfare and that kind of thing to actually become more and more of an issue. I think we need to really teach people how to take care of their homes and to do prevention. So even like, you know, the caulking around windows after the heat and the cold and all of that, you know, that caulking starts to go away. That probably needs to be replaced every year or, you know, re-caulked. You know, we need to have some vigilance around the bathtub. It'd be good to have sensors behind washers and dishwashers and refrigerators, so that if there's a little slow leak, that we detect it early and fix it. So this problem has been around for a long time. However, I think it's becoming more of an issue because of the way we're building buildings now, and we're sealing them up, so the chemicals actually accumulate more in the building. So everything from a mold in the wall making chemicals to you put in new carpet, those fumes, the new paint, all of those things can now accumulate in the buildings because we're sealing them so tightly, and then often not even bringing in fresh air to dilute them. buildings that were built here 100 years ago, they used different technologies so they'd actually breathe better, and be less likely to actually even have mold occur, as well as having chemicals build up. But yeah, maybe some of the just simpler building techniques could potentially provide a safer environment, which is pretty ironic. So if somebody suspects that they have mold and there's no obvious places where there's been some water damage, there are tests that can be run. So there are a couple of labs that can actually do a mycotoxin test. So if you put in Google mycotoxin, you can come up with some companies that can test that in the environment with the dust swab. There's also something called an ERMI test, which again can be done on dust. So the traditional ways of testing where they're just looking for mold spores misses most cases. So you can either find a mold inspector that is familiar with either the mycotoxin testing or the ERMI testing and ask them to do it for you, or you can actually get those kits and do it for yourself, where you just make sure you get some dust. Usually places that we don't dust all the time, over door jambs, over refrigerators, cabinets, those kinds of things are great places to get the dust. And then you can tell if you have a problem. It's a huge stressor on families. Usually not everybody's sick in the family. There's some canaries where, either a child or one of the parents is sicker than the others. So it's sometimes, depending on how sick people are, it's pretty dramatic what people have to do. Sometimes they just have to completely leave their homes and their belongings and start over with everything that doesn't kind of go in the dishwasher type of thing. So it's financially devastating, but it puts things in perspective when people are that sick, that the material things just aren't that important. It's better to live simply in a clean environment than for the kids or one or both of the parents to be ill. So sometimes people can do remediation and fix the house, get rid of the belongings that are the most toxic, and then do the diet and supplements and things that help their body to heal and still stay there. But sometimes people just have to start over practically. It does seem pretty drastic, and it does seem pretty severe. And sometimes it's people, kids having to change schools because there's a problem in the school, or somebody having to, change their job to working at home because they can't be in the building that they're supposed to be working in, or even quit their job sometimes. But it is that severe of a problem for some people. I'm kind of calling this the new smoking. It took us a long time to figure out that tobacco actually caused health risk, and I like the analogy because tobacco causes different problems in different people and at different rates. So some people get a little whiff of it and they get sick in some way. And then other people can smoke for 50 years and maybe get some extra wrinkles, but they still don't have severe lung disease or cancer. So I think that's, as the data really starts coming together on the mycotoxins, we're going to see that it causes a lot of different illnesses in different people, and there's different ways to help people to get better, and different levels of how much they can handle and still stay well. I think this is really, really important for the health of our country. I think we're going to look back and we're going to think, how did we think we could build buildings this way, where we know that the materials can easily be mold food, produce mold, and we're building buildings that often have water intrusion. We know the chemicals that molds make get into the body, and we know that they cause disease. So how did we think that we were going to stay healthy putting ourselves in this environment? It's exciting though, because there are solutions for this. We can help people to get their bodies healthy. We can build buildings that will not mold, and hopefully repair the ones that we have so that they won't mold as bad. It's such a hard thing that I think I've had some resistance to getting out and speaking about mold, or I didn't want to be the mold doctor. I want to do all these other things. I don't want to have a controversial subject that I'm the expert on. I have not. It's taken me 5 years to find my voice, to be able to really start talking about it. It is controversial, and it's going to have a lot of criticism, but I can no longer not talk about it. For me, one of the most foundational things is to get a good, healthy diet. It's amazing what happens when you get the foods that really help support your immune system and detoxification. So I start out with the foundational, really healthy, clean diet. So we talk a lot about that. And then we look for ways that we can help to settle the immune system down, treat infection, and then also to help detoxify, a lot of times with supplements and sometimes with medications. When you look around at the health of our country, just the increase in so many different illnesses, I think it could be a source of solutions. So I really want to focus on that. Yes, I think mold is often devastating. It's a contributor to a lot of illnesses, but it's something we could do something about by building our buildings differently, by so that they're not mold food, and by taking action as soon as we know that there's some type of water, and then doing the prevention. This needs to be a huge wake-up call that we need to educate people what to do when they have water intrusion or accidental leaks. We have to change the way that we take care of our buildings. We have to change the way we take care of our bodies.